We are counting down to the 2024 NAB AFLW Grand Final. Will the Roos' unbeaten run culminate in a historic flag, or will the Lions prevail and break North hearts again? We unpack a huge game with Crows star Ebony Marinoff fresh off her AFLW Best and Fairest win. You're watching The W Show, thanks to NAB. Happy Grand Final week. What a massive week it is, and we've got a massive show coming your way right now as I introduce our bumper panel for today. My co-hostess with the mostest, that's how you introed me last week. So back at you, Sarah Ollie. Welcome to you, big week.
Oh, pumped that we are finally here, and for the first time under lights. Looking forward to it.
I know, very much looking forward to that. Award-winning journalist Sarah Black joins us as always. Sarah, this is a massive week for you in particular. All of your hard work, your brilliant coverage, and it all comes down to Saturday night.
So many storylines out of this one, Nat. I can't wait to get my hands onto them.
And our next guest needs no introduction. She's won it all this season, Adelaide superstar Ebony Marinoff. Great to have you here.
Oh, I think I'm here for the first time.
Yeah.
Glad to be here.
And looking fine in the lemon. I love this power suit.
Yeah, first suit I've ever worn, so look out.
How has the last few days been for you? Because it's been an absolute whirlwind, not only at the AFLW Best and Fairest, the AFL Coaches Association Champion Player of the Year, and then the AFL Players Association MVP and Best Captain. Need I say more? How are you feeling?
No, it's been amazing. It's been a very overwhelming couple of weeks, especially since that Coaches Award. But yeah, it's been amazing to have some of my teammates here. Obviously, wish we're back prepping for a grand final, but it wasn't meant to be, and at least there was something a little bit to celebrate this week after a devastating finish to another loss in a prelim.
I mean, I know you hate talking about yourself, but on an individual level, we have just marvelled at the season that you have. It's not just your ability to win clearance and win the ball at the coalface, but your tackling pressure has been sublime as well. Can you take us through some of the 1%ers that you actually do week in, week out that have taken your game to another level this year?
Yeah, well, I have a pretty rigid, what would you say, routine that I do. But yeah, I swim pretty much most days, go to Pilates twice a week. I do an extra craft session every week with CJ. So when you add all those things up, hopefully I'm, getting those repetitions in. But yeah, I guess if you put the work in, you do get reward. It doesn't just happen. So that's probably been the message over the last week. Just hopefully if I can show little girls and even boys that if you do put in the work, you're going to get reward. You're not just going to, not get better. So that's probably in the messaging, which was nice to be able to deliver.
That's amazing. What drives you? Because you're just that person that keeps wanting to get better and better and better. Has that always just been innate in you, or have you got that from somewhere?
I think just when the AFLW was a thing back in 2015, 2016, I was playing football, so naturally when I was like, oh, that's going to be something, I'm like, oh, I want to do that, and I was really driven to make sure that I was in that competition. And it seems crazy because the competition wasn't much, but that's what I was striving for. So I just always wanted to make sure that I was, the best person I could be, both on and off the field, to be able to have impact. And that's probably something that Doc's embedded in me and challenges me, that when I'm at my best, I'm helping the team be the best. So that drives me to make sure that I'm helping the team be successful. It's been hard to not be successful because that's what drives me, and I miss it. I miss that feeling of satisfaction and getting the ultimate prize, but just got to continue to get better and bring others along with me to make sure they're getting better as well, yeah.
And we're also lucky because we've had a front seat to the evolution of Ebony Marinoff, the inaugural rising star, now the superstar of the competition. And this year, Eb, the co-captaincy alongside Sarah Allen. I feel like when players are given the captaincy, one of two things can happen. They rise, or perhaps they find it to be a bit of a burden, but you're certainly in that first category. Tell us how it's helped you evolve this year on the field.
Yeah, it's a really good question because everyone has such a different answer, and I feel like I even remember when Brie Conan was announced captain, and she spoke really open and honestly post her first season of how she felt a little bit of a burden and she really struggled personally. I listened to a lot of podcasts, whether that's on leadership or football or on a worldwide, listening to RN Titmus and things like that. But my biggest thing when I was announced, I was like, I'm not going to change. I'm not going to let any pressure get to me. Obviously, that's really easy easier said than done. But I feel like I'm a real honest and true to myself. So that really helped in that situation. I set out with our leadership, Dan Jackson, I'm not going to set goals or values. I'm just going to try and be the absolute best person and player I can be to my teammates, always be present. And I feel like I did that really well. So that was probably something that just helped not, feel the burden, and also sharing. You touched on with Sarah Allen, you were 30 girls on the list, and as the coaches and the administration side, to be able to share that load, that comes with, and not always feel the pressure, was really nice as well.
I wanted to ask you about Sarah Allen, because from the outside it feels like you're two very different personalities. How do you work together? What's your relationship like? And being so different, does that help in terms of staying in contact with 30 different girls?
Yeah, absolutely. And as you can imagine, there's so many different personalities in a group of any team. So we don't all have that in-depth relationship, because there's a lot. We've got great leaders as well. I mean, Chelsea Randall's still leading the way. We've got up and coming leaders as well. So I think just our ability to bounce off each other, be really honest. But the best thing about Cez and I, we're actually, as much as people probably think we're really different, we actually think quite similar, and more often than not, we're always on the same page, which is really nice, because you would say something, oh, we're on the same page, and there's no real nitty gritties or elaborating to another discussion post that. So that was really nice. And yes, I've played footy with Cez for a long time. To be able to share that with her, it was really special.
Now, we know on Monday night you didn't have a whole lot of sleep. I want to show you a photo now. You and Hannah Munyard in your hotel robes. What time was this picture snapped? Can you remember? Oh,
it was probably about, 4:30 or so. But yeah, and someone like Hannah Munyard, you talk about leadership, like just having impact on these young girls' journey. I was actually a mentor for the youth girls back in the day. What would they be like? 5-7 years ago. Now Hannah Munyard's on the biggest stage, kicking goal of the year and taking home $50,000. So not only were we celebrating me, but we were celebrating Hannah Munyard, because that was one of the best goals you've probably seen in AFLW.
Drinks on her.
Absolutely. So guys, the stage is set. It all comes down to this Saturday night at Icon Park in what is a grand final rematch. The North Melbourne Kangaroos, the undefeated Roos, hoping to lift the silverware for the first time, and they come up against the Brisbane Lions, who are also out to carve out their own little piece of history too, to become the first W team to go back to back. It's going to be the first night grand final, which is going to be fun. We know Lime Cordial will be performing beforehand. It's also been a bit of a muggy, funny week in Melbourne. We expect similar conditions, Nat, perhaps some rain. It'll be warm. But I'm looking forward to these two titans going head to head. Sam mentioned before, there are storylines everywhere you look, and the stage is set for an absolute cracker.
Yeah, I cannot wait for Saturday night. I'm hoping it doesn't rain, because I'm going to be on the boundary and I don't really want to get my hair wet. But let's take a look back at last year's grand final, and we're going to dig into both teams a little bit deeper. And we want to start with North Melbourne, and obviously this heartbreaking loss from last year, as we see some of the new faces that have come into this North Melbourne side. Libby Birch obviously in defence. Ruby Tripodi didn't play in the grand final last year. Neither did Vicky Wall, who was off with Ireland's rugby team. Eleanor Hartle has been a great addition to Brisbane's side, and Evie Long obviously will be playing in the grand final side this year. But 2023, it was the Roos, Sarah, who were up by 7 points at three-quarter time, and then the Lions just overran them in that final turn. They came out like a team on a mission, and they ended up winning by 17 points. What do you think was the biggest difference in that game?
It's something we've spoken about a little bit when it comes to Brisbane, is that intangible, the hunger, the desire and the drive. They have in just this innate confidence that they can overrun anyone from whatever position they want to be in. So there were a few things they changed up. They threw Brie Conan into the midfield to clamp down on Jazz Garner. She ended up winning the medal for best on ground, Brie. This year it seems to be more of a Jade Ellinger tagger role rather than Brie, but that's something they can employ. And Dakota Davidson had a moment in the sun too, kicking 2 really big goals. So, there are a few things at play there, and North, they've been stewing on this for 12 months.
Well, they have, but they say that they haven't really spoken about it a whole lot, Eb. I mean, you've been in grand finals and you've played in losses and wins as well. From your perspective, how do you think North Melbourne will be using what happened last year to drive them forward?
Well, you touch on, I'm not quite sure if I believe that they've not touched on the grand final. I'm sure they would have looked at it, in the pre-season, things like that. But I think, like you've touched on, there's a desire and hunger to get back there. And you look at the Vicky Wall, she's been so impressive this year, and you talk about the big names in terms of the Emma Carneys, the Jazz Carner and Ash Riddell, but Vicky Wall could be the game changer. You talk about the sparks on the Brisbane and just that exploiting that speed and things like that. She could be the game changer. Her final series been really impressive, and then you bring in someone like Libby Birch that didn't play last year, who could potentially become a 3-time premiership player at 3 different clubs. But I think their experience and their heartache from last year and the determination from their leaders, just with the way you speak to them about their pre-season and just their desire and their hunger to make sure that they're there, I think they're ready. I would like to think they're ready, but you talk about the Lions, like you touched on, Sarah, they just have this hunger, and people envy it. You know, they might say that it's something that it's an arrogant, but that's what you need to be able to be the best and beat the best and get your other teammates involved. And we'll probably touch on Belle Dawes, but she'll be the fire lighter on Saturday night, I'm sure.
Yeah, so these two sides have met 6 times before. Brisbane won the first 5 encounters, including last year's grand final. But this year in round 1, it was North Melbourne who came out on top for the first time, beating the Brisbane Lions. It was hot and steamy conditions at Brighton Homes Arena, and they absolutely demolished the Brisbane Lions, Sarah. What did they do differently in this game that they can take into this week's grand final?
It was absolutely scintillating footy from North Melbourne. I think they wanted to make a statement, so that helps a little bit. But what we really noticed out of this game was just the amount of space they were able to generate over the back, and it's something that Adelaide, clamped down a little bit on in your qualifying final. But North had just acres of space in that forward line, and they were able to benefit off it, and Brisbane were caught napping. So that's something I don't think will happen again, but it is a little wild card up the sleeve there.
Well, it has been 12 months, of course, since that heartbreaking grand final loss to Brisbane. The Roos have certainly learnt many a lesson, and this was their coach, Darren Crocker, after last week's preliminary final win over Port Adelaide.
We're better placed this year, coming into the grand final. That there's been a level of calmness and being considered, right throughout the whole year, trying to stay as present as we possibly can, and that was evident again today.
Sarah, Ollie, I wonder too, the pressure, because they've had this perfect season. Is there an element of the pressure maybe being too much for them, given that they are going into this final as the favourites?
It's really tricky to know, isn't it? It's nagging at the back of my mind that perhaps the only loss could be on grand final day. But we've also heard from Darren Crocker throughout the year that they've relied on Roger Federer and his mantra. And I really love this thought because, as we all know, the Swiss maestro, one of the best of all time, and he won 80% of his games, but he actually only won something around 50 to 60% of his points. So if they ever have a setback within a match or if they have a bad quarter, they just put it to the back of their mind and they're able to get going. So I feel like that will hold them in good stead too.
So we're now going to identify a biggest asset as well as a vulnerability for each side. So starting with the Roos, Sarah Black, you're in the hot seat. Their biggest asset, please.
Well, Jazz Garner, put her to one side, Ash Riddell, put her to one side. It is all about the tall forwards here and their forward line in general. They're just so dominant overhead. There's not many sides who are able to go with them at all across the competition. And we've seen them improve too. Like Kate Sheila's 35, she's in career best form. Talia Randall, go back a few years, she was shaky in front of goal and she has been rock solid. Eb mentioned Vicky Wall, she's the game changer in there. She can play tall, she can play small, she's really versatile, and she won't take a backward step, especially when it's finals on the line. Bella Reddy and Alice O'Loughlin, beautiful icing on the cake.
Yeah, no, you certainly are right. Eb, where are they vulnerable, do you think?
Oh, I think it's their ability to, stop the defence. Like I think they're a little bit, I don't like to say slow because they're a well-oiled machine, but it's the defence because Kathy Clark, you got Charlie Mullins that goes through, Courtney Hodder. It's so hard to match up on. You don't like to see their flaw, but that's that's where they exploited Hawthorn. They just came on charging. Their high half forwards got speed on the game, and it is so hard to stop because they have speed all over. It's not just your Kathy Sparks popping up, it's your Courtney Hodders and Belle Dawes in there as well. The mix is quite scary.
So those are the big assets and the vulnerabilities of the Roos. I think one of the other growth areas, Sarah, Ollie, for the Roos has been in their younger players, and they've been so impressive this season.
Absolutely, and I feel like when it comes to Grand Final day, we often talk about the bottom 5 or 6 players on any list. And I'm not saying that these girls, so Taylor Gatt, Tess Craven, Bella Eddy, Alice O'Loughlin, Ruby Tripodi, Mia King or Erica O'Shea are necessarily that. But they're young, aren't they? We're calling them the Joeys because they're 23 and under. And I just feel this year they've really risen to the occasion. There's less reliance on North superstars, although they are still doing a great job. Eb, and Sarah mentioned before the mix of Eddie and O'Loughlin up forward. You love what they've brought this season.
They've been so impressive. I loved seeing Alice Loughlin get into the All-Australian. Sometimes there's a few mids that go in there, but her ability to hit the scoreboard, and she's ferocious. She's got mongrel about her, and I love that. And Bella Eddy, I mean, she'd have to be the cleanest forward half player in the game.
Beautiful player.
Her ground ball gets in the forward. Like, when you've got players like that delivering it to your tools, underrated because we keep talking about it, but this is why North Melbourne, who have been so impressive this year, because their younger brigade have stepped up to the challenge. And how can you not with the experienced leaders that they have at North Melbourne?
And storylines are plenty. We've discussed some of them, and Eb, you mentioned it, but Libby Birch, already a 2-time premiership player. She won a flag with the Bulldogs. She won a flag with Melbourne. Both of those premierships coming against Brisbane, mind you, and she's going for a third. No player in the AFL or AFLW has ever achieved that. So there's something about Libby Birch and silverware, and I asked her about all of that in a chat last week.
I obviously been very privileged to be a part of those 2 premierships and be a part of those amazing wins that takes a whole season to get there. I think what I've been able to do this year, particularly at the Roos, is maybe add a little bit of experience in those moments.
You've obviously seen what it takes to win a flag. What can you see in this group that makes you think and believe that you have what it takes to win a premiership?
We're obviously been undefeated, which is a great little bit of evidence. It means nothing on the biggest stage because you've obviously got to deliver and execute on the day. But I think that gives us great belief.
And wouldn't she be the envy of the competition, Libby Birch, if she is to claim her 3rd flag at a 3rd club? That's the north side of the equation. Let's get into the Brisbane Lions now. And Eb, I hate to bring this up, but your side did play them last week in a really pulsating, tough preliminary final. At halftime, you're up by 7 points, but then Brisbane just turned it on, particularly in that 3rd term. They kicked 5 goals to 1 in the second half. How did it feel being out there when they start to gel and get the game on their terms, because they're hard to compete against when it's like this?
Yeah, absolutely. They're so hard to stop when they get their speed on the ball. I think you touched on with the North Melbourne exploiting them and making the ground really big in round 1. That's what Lions are going to have to do if they want to win the game, because they're pretty much they're unstoppable against us. They brought the pressure. We weren't able to actually absorb the pressure and then bring the pressure that we brought in the first half. We were probably even in the tackles in the first half, but they ran over us offensively and defensively, and we just weren't able to absorb the pressure, which was really disappointing because that's finals footy, like you touched on it. It's hot and hard, but to not be able to absorb that pressure and I guess lose by 3 goals was really devastating.
Craig Starcevich is Brisbane's coach, and this was him post-match.
Trying to play a little bit too precise, I thought, in the first half. But once we sort of got into like full-on surge mentality and got the ball forward any shape or whatever way we could, we actually started to look dangerous. So just to get some territory in the front half and lock it in there and just have a few repeat looks at the goal, I guess. That was our main message.
Craig Starcevich there. Now, Sarah, we saw at the start of the show, we were looking at the changes that we are going to forecast for this weekend's decider. A player that was there last year but who's elevated her game this year is Taylor Smith, now up to the 22 goals. She shared the leading goal kicking award with Ash Maloney from Geelong. And I guess what she's done this year is allowed Dakota Davidson to free up a little bit, and I guess the pressure isn't so isolated on Dax as well.
They're now a genuine 1-2 punch in that forward line. So you go back a few years and it was Jessie Wardlaw who was playing alongside Dakota Davidson. It's just that transition has now been fully made into Taylor Smith. She's also been spending a lot more time in attack. I wanted to shout out Eleanor Hartle, who's crossed from West Coast, and she's made an enormous impact. It doesn't always show on the stat sheet, but she's been that third tall who can roll into the ruck, allowing Taylor Smith to spend much more time in attack.
Now, the biggest asset and vulnerability, I'll begin with you, Ebbs, when it comes to the Brisbane Lions and their biggest asset. You mentioned it before. I think we all love this player, Isabel Dawes. Well, she's a firecracker and I love that. She's coming off her maiden All-Australian blazer, and I've watched her in tight a few times, Ebbs, throughout the season, and when the game's on the line and Brisbane needs someone to bring the energy, it's Belle Dawes they defer to.
Yeah, I mean, she's incredible. She's the energiser. It's so awesome to see. You love players like this that just put smiles on their teammates' faces and bring them up. And she's the Energizer Bunny. There's no secret. And I feel like that's something it's hard to stop. I mean, there's probably talks like, how do you stop that? Because she brings so much energy. But I know Belle Dawes and I don't think anyone can stop her. She's an amazing teammate. Her teammates love her and thrive with her around the ball. But she's such a competitive beast as well. But she's so clean. She's not just the Energizer. She uses the ball by foot and hands so impressively. And she's one of the... she'd be their most important player internally and probably externally, now getting the recognition with their first All-Australian.
How chirpy is she out there? And are you chirpy? I feel like you might give a bit of lip too.
No, I'm not chirpy at all. No.
You'd be more to just have a bit of a chat, wouldn't you?
No, I don't actually say much at all. Yeah, no.
Just goes.
And Belle, yes. What's Belle like?
Well, yeah, she doesn't chirp to me. I actually know Belle. I actually spent some of the summer up in Sunshine Coast with some of the Brisbane Lions players. Belle Dawes was one of them. So to actually get to know, you know them on the field and what energy they bring, but just a really down-to-earth human being who wants to get the best out of herself. So it's always nice to get to know players off the field. But yeah, there's a few chirpy ones in the Brisbane Lions, but I don't think Belle Dawes is one of them.
All right, that's the biggest asset, thanks to you, Ebony. And Sarah, when it comes to the biggest vulnerability for the Lions, I mean, they don't have many, but you've got a bit of a gut feel there where the Roos could exploit them.
Yeah, so I'm bouncing off my point from earlier in the show. When it comes to North Melbourne's forward line, Brisbane's defence isn't overly tall. They've been playing without Kate Lutkins this year, who has announced her retirement, so big congrats to Kate. And, Bree Conan, Shannon Campbell, we know they're such dependable players, but they don't necessarily have the overhead reach to match a Talia Randall or an Emma King or Kate Sheila as well. So I think airily, if it is indeed a clean night, no rain, that could be an area where North Melbourne could really exploit Brisbane.
All right, it's time now to get to the deep dive with Gemma Bastiani. And Gem, when it comes to versatility in the Lions midfield, they certainly have it in spades.
Last week on the deep dive, we spoke about how good North Melbourne's midfield was. You've had to play them a couple of times, Ebony. This week, we're going to talk about Brisbane and the way they're able to adapt different players to that midfield to change in game. So, you had to play them on the weekend, I'm very sorry. How do you go about dealing with a really physical group of midfielders like these three?
Yeah, I mean, they're both amazing contested beast in Spark and Dawes, and Ali Anderson's probably more that small, nimble player and got a massive tank. I think she really worked on her running this year. But for us personally, it doesn't change our system too much, but you just got to be wary that you've got, just real strong bodies in there, but you love competing against those types of players.
You pointed at your quads. We know Kathy Spark's got some good quads.
She does.
But what they did against you guys on the weekend was added some running players to the midfield. We can probably add Charlie Mullins to this group too. How does that change the dynamic of a midfield?
Just adds run to and Hodder pressure. She's not only got the run, but she's got the pressure. And I think in the second half last week, you saw their pressure really up. Their tackles smashed us into tackles, and we weren't able to absorb that. But in Conway and Ellinger, their defensive running is outstanding as well as their offensive. So just to bring that speed into the game is what they did.
So we've got some examples of the first half against Marinoff's Adelaide on the weekend, starting with Ali Anderson playing against you, Belle Dawes and Kathy Spark in the middle. So this is Brisbane's traditional starting midfield setup. This is how they want to go. Hodder is generally the first one they swing into there. How do you go about dealing with the physicality and stopping that handball out to the winger that they want to get?
You just have to, as Adelaide plays, you have to bring the pressure, and we were able to do that in the first half. But it's great to play Brisbane because you're combating against two really good midfielders who just have their system and structure in place. But what they did in the second half, they changed it up and added a little bit of a mix and probably up their pressure.
Yeah.
And when the runners bring pressure, it's a bonus because it's not just the contested beast doing that.
So the big thing about the way this kind of system of Brisbane's midfield wants to work is they want to win the hard ball, but then they want to handball out to the running winger on the outside. That's how they get it into space. But what they did against you guys on Saturday was switch it up in the second half when they weren't getting that. We've got some vision to show the different players. So you all of a sudden have to deal with a Jade Allinger. How does she play differently through the midfield compared to an Ali Anderson?
It's probably, I reckon it was more of an accountable role. I was actually able to still kind of win clearance, but it was just the way our system wasn't able to absorb that pressure of not just the tackle, but it's the speed on the ball.
Yep.
And Svark went forward as well, so you bring Courtney Hodder up, just that ability to crush packs and drive that ball forward hurt us in the second half.
So instead of needing to get the handball and the clearance to the outside winger, they had representation inside the contest as well. So there was that run coming through the middle of the ground rather than just on the wings on the outside. And it really hurt you guys in terms of the speed on the ball, didn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And just the pressure that Lions were able to bring in the second half. Not only were we able to bring the pressure, we weren't able to absorb it. And they got their speed game running. I think Ola Ojwara was incredible on that wing. Probably hasn't had the strongest season to date, but her last week's game, and probably have a lot to say against North's wings as well.
So I'm really sorry to make you relive that, Ebony. But this week we know that North Melbourne's midfield is amazing. I think whoever wins the midfield battle will win the game.
Beautiful stuff there from Gemma Bastiani and Ebony Marinoff. And I loved how Em just pointed at her thighs when speaking about the power and the strength of Kathy Svark. It gets us to our NAB star power. And Sarah, when celebrating Kathy Svark, this isn't just about last week where she had the 1 goal from the 14 disposals, but her impact throughout the finals has been immense.
This has been a game-changing move from Craig Starcevich. You know, we know Kathy Svark as a tagger, a really dependable midfielder who can win her own footy, but she's now become this line-breaking half forward who can turn a game on its head. There's not many that can match her for power and strength. And while she's not always hitting the scoreboard, she has that potential, and she can also set up her opponents as well. Her opponents, her teammates.
She's an incredible player. Grand final predictions. I want them now. I want the winner and the margin, please. Sarah Ollie, you go.
I think it is going to be a tight one, but I think the undefeated season of North Melbourne will continue by 7 points. I want it to go down to that final siren.
Sarah Black.
Well, I was going to say Brisbane by 7 points. So we're clearly in agreement on the margin, just maybe not the winner.
Eb, what is your gut telling you?
My gut tells me that Brisbane Lions will go back-to-back and they'll win it in the same year as the boys.
Wow.
Ooh,
Yeah,
the
big.
double.
And I want to get a best on ground from you. Who do you think it will be?
I'm going to go with Kathy Svark, just because she's been the game changer. We won't go a big name or the Bell Jaws Energizer, just her ability to game changer. And it's been super impressive because you just watch the vision there, but the Sophie Conways and the Courtney Hodders of the world coming to the midfield mix has allowed Kathy Svark to spit forward.
I've been north for about a week, and then this morning I woke up and my gut was like, Brisbane, but I'm going to stick with North and
Come on,
ignore my
Edward.
gut at this point. But extra time, that's what we want. We want extra time. I love it.
we do not.
Now, before we let you go, just a quick touch on Adelaide's season. Obviously, 3 preliminary final losses now in a row. I know you're not going to be happy with that because you're such a driver of success. So what does Adelaide need to do from your point of view to close the gap?
Yeah, when you sit there and look at 3 prelim losses, it's not nice. But yeah, we're just going to have to get to work. You'd probably like to see bring a couple of youth in, star power. I'm not sure that happens with our draft picks, but that's up to the list managers and to have a look at what talent's around, whether we bring people in or whatnot. That's probably not up to me, but 3 prelim losses in a row, you probably can't be doing the same thing. So when I get back to Adelaide, I'll be starting to ask all the questions. But on me, I'll just have to get to work, take the others along with me, and make sure that we're fitter and stronger coming into the new year.
You'll get Eloise Jones back, which will help as well, particularly in that speed department. The inaccuracy in front of goal, Eb, I mean, it was the story of the season, unfortunately, for you. And I know how frustrating it is to have to talk about it. We could see the frustrations on field because you've got some really great players just missing some set shots that AFLW players shouldn't be missing. Was it from where they were taking the shots? Is it the set shot routine, Eb? Or What can you put it down to? Is it a mental thing?
Yeah, I mean, it'd be a whole range of things. We did touch on it because it is a matter of fact and you can't hide away from it. I don't think we spoke about it too much, but it was the story of our season. Our inaccuracy and ability to execute our roles in terms of in front of goals and just hitting the scoreboard was really disappointing because you got to kick goals to win games, and that's what we weren't able to do. So we'll have to, you touch on the mental side, we'll continue to work with that. But yeah, really disappointing the execution. I don't think we had really one game where we executed across 4 quarters. So when you're sitting here, it's really disappointing. But it is what it is. You can't pretend it didn't happen. So we'll have to acknowledge it and get to work.
And when it comes to, you know, closing that gap, who are some of the teammates who you are looking at now and go, we can see a big season ahead from these girls?
Yeah, well, I think you look at Sarah Goodwin. Her season was really impressive. Just her ability to break line. She's such an impressive young kid. I love Goody. She's a competitor, and sometimes it's that self-doubt. Do I belong at this level? I'm playing on the likes of Courtney Hodders. It can be really daunting. So again, mental side. But I would love to. She'll be an All-Australian one day, and then you got Zoe Prowse. Her ability to beat the best forwards this year was so impressive. So proud of her. You could probably look back at her stats, but she didn't get done by one of the best forwards in the competition all year. And for a 21-year-old to do that, she'll be the best key defender in the competition if she's not already, and she'll get to work because she knows she's okay now, and she does keep a lid on it. But when you get that confidence in yourself, you thrive.
Ebony, you've ticked off a lot this year and you can tick off another one. Your debut on the W Show. I mean, I think we need to get it back, don't we, next season? Because
100%.
you've been
we love
an
you.
absolute pro. Thank you so much for coming on.
Oh, thanks for having me, guys.
Sarah, you're almost there. Thank you.
Nearly there.
Nat, we've got one more show to go.
Can't wait.
And we're looking forward to seeing you next week on the W Show, thanks to NAB. It all comes down to this: Saturday night at Icon Park, North Melbourne and the Brisbane Lions.
Join me, Sarah Hosking, and me, Sarah Rowe, as we take a look at life on and off the footy field. Tagged every Tuesday on afl.com.au/AFLW or wherever you get your podcasts.